I'm on my usual way to Taliban. I have some things that I must pick up. It always seems I always say when Beth comes with me, my trip is hijacked, because we end up doing everything that she needs to do, and because we're going to Taliban, she usually finds things that must be done. My biggest, I won't say hate, you should keep that word out of your vocabulary, but the one I dislike most is the trip to the bank. I'm always a little bit embarrassed going into anywhere where it's a line, because in the Philippines, and without any rancor at all, you go to the front of the line. I went to Jollibee yesterday to get some things, some burgers and a choco float for Beth, which is her favourite, and it's a long line. Because Jollibee, even though I did speak to one of the managers and asked her, is it possible that you could put a sign up, which every place that I've been in, they have a sign that says priority line for seniors and pregnant ladies, of course. And they don't have that at Jollibee. So I asked them, could they do that, because I actually find it embarrassing to go up to the front of the line and say the obvious, I'm a senior. It just feels awkward to me. So I'll get what I have done, that I want to have done today, because I'm on my own. I usually have breakfast at either PP Coffee or Vidasto. Vidasto have now reinstalled their Wi-Fi, and it's even faster than it was before. Not that it was fast before, but it certainly is now. And PP Coffee also have good Wi-Fi, and I go there. Both are pleasant enough places to be, especially I think PP Coffee now, because I got used to it. It's much more light, and I enjoy that. So these are always drives of reflection. I always think about my first impressions of coming to the Philippines. I've got to tell you that I mentioned at the end of the last video that I made about how it was actually very primitive. We had to fetch water at the well in 5 gallon, if we could carry it, and I could then, 5 gallon containers that would bring our drinking water, and then we'd walk down to the well, to the other well on the other side of the hill would be the well where we bathed. So all of that was very primitive. The house was tiny. We shared with Nanai, and this was a house that she had borne 10 children. Beth is one of 10 children. Beth, I think, is the youngest. But Beth has always, to my mind, has always been the hero of the family, because she was the one that, when she finally was able to get a job, she used to send all of her money home to the family, which, when she talks about that particular phase of her life, it was always of having no money, because as soon as she got her pay, she would send the money to her mother and father. Her father was a farmer, a rice field farmer, and a fisherman. And they used to have a tiny patch of land right on the water, which in retrospect was was perhaps the wrong thing to do, but they sold that tiny piece of land for a pittance. But whenever we look back on things that we did in retro, we always did things for too little money. When I think of some of the cars which would be worth huge amounts of money, I remember selling a two-seater Morgan, 1900 and frozen to death. Late, I think it was just after the war. It couldn't have been much. I remember it as a 1938 two-seater Morgan with a Coventry Climax engine, and I sold it for £35. Can you imagine? So we actually lived very, very simply then. We were still recovering, hadn't quite got my US pension reinstated. It had been stopped because I didn't receive the letter which was requesting that I should send in the life certificate, so they stopped the pension, and that went on for several months, and life was quite difficult. We used to go, we got a loan. We got a loan from our friend Dean. Dean and Mickey loaned us £500. And I think with that £500 we put a deposit down, either on the, I remember it as being on the motorcycle. I think Dean thought that it was on the multicab, but either one, we put it down on the motorcycle, and we had the motorcycle on finance, which we had to pay off fairly quickly. So things began to be easier, but at the same time they were still difficult. We at one point, a regular thing was because the ATM back then was even more primitive. A modern appliance that was so badly run. So I got two ladies, and they're walking in the road with their back to me, and don't know I'm there and don't move away, so I have to slow to a stop. Yeah, so we never knew when we were going to Taliban on the bike whether the ATM was going to be working. So very often it was broken. They didn't know how to service it, I guess. So our last resort was to pawn Beth's wedding ring, and we did that a few times, I can tell you. So my impressions of the Philippines then was we came out to this very simple way of living. We didn't have what you would call a married life, much of it then, which I think is how families are created in the Philippines on, what can we call it, private moments are somehow achieved by various trickery, sending children out or whatever they do in order to create the conception, or to have the conception of the next child, would have to be done in extreme secrecy, shall we say. So that was when we decided that we would have to build the house, which I decided to build in a material that I could actually handle myself. I was 74 then, so I wasn't going to be handling a concrete block and mixing cement and stuff like that. So I'd made up my mind I would use metal stud, and I was able to work with metal stud because it's so light. And now I'm bullying my way into traffic at the traffic lights because the traffic lights are out. So now we're into the traffic and I need to focus.